So right now, I'm on my own video called "The Drama Is Just Not Worth It." I just uploaded this like a little while ago, and I was just reviewing it. That's why I have it here. And there's some things that I forgot to mention. So I guess this is just like a I don't know what the fuck you would call this, but it's where you forget something and you just add more thoughts. So call it what you want. But um, and if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, then go back and watch the video that came right before this one, the title you see on the screen. So um, basically the person that I mentioned that I was in that relationship with, that I was dating or whatever for the 3 years, the older woman, the 47-year-old woman with the two kids. One of them was 16 and the other one was 21. And you see, I know that by the things that I'm about to mention and what I've just mentioned, that I wouldn't be surprised that as long as I've been on YouTube and stuff like that, if someone or two comes across this video and they know exactly what I'm talking about, and that's fine with me. So, like I said, a 16 and a 21-year-old son, and you imagine that when you get with them, you're 17 years old, right? And they're doing all this fucked up shit to you and is emotionally, psychologically abusive and controlling. A couple of add-on things real quick if I can make it quick. Do you know this person, besides being crazy and trying to do things to threaten my life, like, trying to shoot through my grandmother's window? You're talking about my grandmother, where my grandmother stayed. You trying to get someone to aim for me, and the bullet hits the window frame. But it was in front of the couch that I always sit at, and lucky for me, I wasn't home on time that day. I was late. And I do believe, and now that if my memory serves me correctly, and I didn't realize this until recently, I do believe that the same day that that happened, and it scared my grandmother, the sound of the bullet coming through the window when I wasn't there, that was the same that I was approached by a bunch of people that they were getting to stalk and harass me and try to assault me. I was approached by them shortly before I got back to the house. So this whole thing was planned, okay? And I'm just going to come out and say it. And eventually, like I said, eventually I will say this person's name and identify them. Because over 20 years later, I'm remembering this. Oh, your name is going to be put out there. You better believe it. For the 3 years of emotional abuse and physical abuse I had to go through at the hands of this person, okay? And you even have that where my grandmother lives? Oh, okay. All right. So, I hope to this very day and beyond that they're getting their just desserts, and I'm sure they are. I'm not even going to mention the ways that I think something should happen to them at the time of their death. I'm not even going to go into the details of what I think about that. But what I will say is that this person was putting me through so much shit, and I had already had things happen to me in my childhood and up to the point that I met them, that while I was staying there, I wasn't living with them, but I would spend most nights at their house, even though my grandmother lived a block away. Uh, just in case coincidentally anyone that knows them happens to come across this video or tells them, just know that during during the last 1.5 years out of the 3 years, that I would often be laying in their bed contemplating what I was going to do to that whole family. Okay, all three of them. I had planned out what I was going to do, and I was trying to figure out the successful way to do it and make sure that it happens correctly. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube as far as, messing with my channel. Other than that, I don't give a flying fuck. So, but the added details are this person, they were so manipulative, you know, that when we would not be talking, they would do some fucked up shit and I would stop talking to them and go back to my grandmother's house to stay. That they would come to the building, and we had a security guard in the lobby, and leave, they would bring me back my stuff that I left there, but they would also put a letter in there talking about all this nonsense about what I mean to them and all this other shit. They would only talk like that when they thought I didn't want to be bothered with them no more because of their abuse, and would put the key inside the envelope with the letter. And they would be asking the security guard questions about my whereabouts. He would call and harass my grandmother and act like it's in a friendly way, asking questions. Do you know when I stopped living with my grandmother and long after I stopped being in a relationship with that person that had left out of Harlem, that this person still called my grandmother asking about me? Do you know that, right? Like that takes a whole kind of crazy. That takes a whole kind of crazy. And what the crazy thing is that after they did what I said in the last video, and I explained in detail about the situation, about we were arguing about something, and they tried to say I slapped them. They started throwing some china dishes at me and cut my wrist and my hand. So I had a cut on one hand, and on the other hand, I had a cut on my wrist. I had to get stitches at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital in Harlem. And then I ended up having to, um, I ended up getting them out of there, and they threw out a lot of my stuff. On top of that, the fucked up thing is that the job I was working at the time, I had a manager, my supervisor, make fun of me when they seen me come back to work with my hands in bandages, and I had to explain to them why I couldn't do too much, like lift certain heavy things that were too heavy because the way my hands was with the bandages and having wait for the stitches to heal. And they made a joke, like idiot guys always do when they see you being domestically abused, physically abused by a woman. They think that's funny. So you imagine coming to your job and you have that person make that joke and the other people in the room are laughing at you. And also imagine this. Imagine a couple of years after that happened and you done long left this person. You're trying to get over the things they did to you. That you happen to go to the South and visit some of your family that you haven't seen in 10 years. And invites you down there to stay. But it's just to get you down there to do some dirt to you because they're jealous of how you got to stay with your grandmother. But your grandmother being their aunt didn't let them stay for years just you, so they're jealous. Jealous of somebody 1,000 miles away that's supposed to be their cousin. That's a whole nother video that I'm going to do. And your aunt brings up what happened to you at the hands of this woman and other people. She got to do stuff to you. She brings it up and says, well, your mother thought that you deserved it. Can you imagine the kind of flashbacks that would cause and what that would do to a person? Your own so-called aunt to bring up something that somebody did to you 1,000 miles away from where you are in that state visiting them. People are evil, okay? So, the tidbits. Not only did that happen, and the thing about the people laughing at the job, and this happened more than once and in more than one job location, that they thought this was funny. It so turns out that this woman that I was in that relationship with, guess who they used to work for? The Manhattan County, which is New York City, the Manhattan County District Attorney's Office. As an assistant, they were a secretary to the assistant DA. Okay? That was before this happened, though. They got fired from there. And I have figured out years later that the reason why they got fired, one of the reasons why, is because their boss, which was the assistant DA, and I'm pretty sure he was a black man, had hired a younger Asian, less than half her age, and this older woman apparently got jealous of them and started probably sassing at the boss or not wanting to do certain things and probably wanted to sleep with him. I don't know if they slept together. I don't think so. But apparently that got in the way of them doing their job and being a pleasant person to be around on the job. So they fired him for insubordination and perceived incompetence. And so when they did what they did to me and they got locked up, they took them down to Central Booking to lock them up. And guess where that Central Booking office was? In the same damn building they worked in. 100 Center Street, I believe. Okay? And the people in there, was a white woman that I was talking to try to convince them to let her out because I didn't want nothing to happen to me since she was locked up and being that she was already abusive. That white woman did not want to let her out. Apparently they did not like her. And it so turns out that coincidentally, her two sisters also worked in that same building for the DA's office. What a hell of a coincidence that is. That's why I said maybe some people that's listening are gonna, if somebody, one or two people that may coincidentally be subscribed, come across this video, and you just happen to know somebody that knows them or you know them, you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. And I have no regrets on talking about this. None at all. Should have been said something. So one of the reasons they didn't like her already because apparently she was causing problems around the workplace before they actually fired her ass. And they also didn't like the fact that someone that old was messing with someone like me. They thought that, basically a year or two younger, that could have been seen as statutory rape. But you know, if it's happening to a male as the so-called victim of it, ain't nobody gonna do shit. Matter of fact, what is it? It's seen as lucky to this day that you're lucky to be able to date an older female. They used to have talk shows back in the 90s that would glorify this, and fake news stories that would make it, like talk about how teachers were doing that and all that, glorifying that. There is no glory in getting with an older female that can do that kind of shit to you and might be crazy and also be going through menopause, which makes it worse. So those are just the add-ons that I wanted to put there. I mean, coincidences are really funny, and it's no surprise that the person that tried to shoot through my grandmother's window actually was able to obtain a weapon and know exactly how to do it from a building that was just as tall as my grandmother's, the only building that was that tall that they could shoot from at an angle. So they had to be on the roof in order to shoot downward to the 12th floor. Okay? And they made sure nothing happened to them and nothing happened to the people that they got to do certain things to me while they were being domestically abusive. Why? Because they had connections. Because they used to work for the Manhattan DA's office. Oh yeah, I am going to start talking about this stuff, and I will say who did it and who this crazy person was. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, it's something else. So like I said in the last video, don't sit here and believe what everybody been saying, especially like the mainstream media and what most people's perception is, that only men can be abusive, especially older men, and only do things to young girls. Bullshit. There are women out here that are a fucking trip. And when they know the right people, there's certain things they can get away with, but not anymore. And so you imagine that someone is controlling and has the power to even do that kind of stuff to you. And a person with that of that age, 47, that should have way better shit to do, is doing all of that to someone that between the age of 17 and 21, as long as I was in a relationship with them. To the point of, I believe that same night that happened at my grandmother's house with someone shooting through the window, and just about a half hour prior on my way home, I had people that they had trying to do stuff to me on the way home that night, that someone called my job. And when when the dispatcher transferred the call to me, and I pick up the phone, somebody made a threat over the phone and hung up the phone. They were calling from a payphone, and I know that they were responsible for all of that. They had people call my job, and all of that, and try to shoot through my grandmother's window, and then 2 years later, you talking about you calling somebody's house while they have their child there, like when they have their baby there, you calling their house? You got some. Bruh, okay. You see, it's all fun and games until that person gets older and they start to remember everything. I'm going to just say it just like that. And then I almost forgot to add, too, that when I said you imagine that, a person that is manipulative, controlling, and psychologically and physically abusive, that you're in a relationship with, and you too naive, too young, or feel too threatened to leave them, like I was, then on top of that, when you finally do leave them and move from the situation that they were causing for you, to make it to where you can't even stay at your own grandmother's house anymore, then you come back later, two or more years later, and now you have a child, and they got someone, as soon as you come back, they call your grandmother's house while you staying there with your baby. And you my grandmother pick up the phone, and they talking about, can they speak to me? And she said, what are you calling about? And they're like, oh, we got unfinished business. When you come across this video, let me explain something to you and anybody who's listening to know you. Now, 20 years later, I got unfinished business with you because I remember everything. Let me make that clear. That's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to leave it at that for now.